Hello, my dear adventurers, it's Fox. Welcome back to another evening of shared stories and adventures. So for tonight, I thought it'd be fun to take a look at a bunch of lore theories for the Song of Ice and Fire series. More specifically, the Game of Thrones books. Who knows when Winds of Winter will come out, but in the meantime it's worth just sort of speculating and coming up with far-fetched, and in some cases, actually super reasonable predictions. I've left timestamps in the description, in case you'd rather skip to a specific theory that sounds interesting. A couple of things I want to mention before we get started. First off, none of these ideas are my own theories. I'm definitely not smart enough to come up with this stuff, so I've left links for all the original posts and the big-brained people who did all the thinking down in the description. What I've done is try and put them all in one place and add tons of context and information for people who maybe aren't as familiar with the series or need a refresher. And second, this is speculation based on the books only, as they're not complete yet. So let's all keep ignoring the show's endings and pretend they never happened, because the way the books end will probably be quite different. Okay, enough rambling. It's time to get cozy, put our tinfoil hats on, and let's begin. Okay, so the first theory is that Jon Snow is Lightbringer. Basically, that the sword isn't a literal sword. For some context, in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, there's an ancient prophecy about a legendary hero called Azor Ahai, who will be reborn to save the world from darkness. According to the prophecy, this hero once forged a magical flaming sword called Lightbringer thousands of years ago during a catastrophic winter event called the Long Night, when ice demons known as the White Walkers nearly destroyed humanity. The way Azor Ahai created Lightbringer is a pretty dark story. After 2 failed attempts to forge the sword, he finally succeeded by plunging the blade through his wife Nissa Nissa's heart. Her sacrifice supposedly gave the sword its magical properties. This prophecy is central to the Red Religion, a faith that worships a fire god called Rella. Followers of this religion, like the Red Priestess Melisandre, believe that Azor Ahai will be reborn to fight against the coming darkness, and that they need to find or forge Lightbringer again. Logically, most of us assume this means finding or creating an actual magical sword. But the thing is, George R.R. Martin is always subverting the typical fantasy tropes, and the hero's magical sword is one of the biggest cliches in the genre. What if Lightbringer isn't a sword at all? What if it's a person? Specifically, what if it's Jon Snow? To understand where this theory comes from, we need to look at Martin's inspirations. He said that the Red Religion is based on 2 historical belief systems: the ancient Persian religion, Zoroastrianism, which is pretty obvious with all the fire and light versus darkness stuff, and Catharism, a Christian movement in medieval France. The Catha connection is less obvious, but it's really important to unlocking this whole theory. In 1982, a best-selling book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail, proposed a wild conspiracy theory about the Cathars. The authors claimed that the legendary Holy Grail wasn't actually a cup that caught Jesus' blood at the crucifixion. Instead, they argued it was based on a mistranslation of old French texts. The original phrase wasn't San Graal, meaning Holy Grail, but Sang Real, meaning royal blood. In their theory, the Grail was actually Jesus' bloodline, his descendants through a secret marriage to Mary Magdalene. The Cathars supposedly protected this royal bloodline in secret. Now, this theory has been thoroughly debunked by historians, but we're not going to get into that, because it really doesn't matter at all for a fantasy series. What matters is that Martin used Catharism as one of his two main inspirations for the Red Religion, a religious group that became famous in popular culture for protecting a sacred bloodline disguised as a holy object. That's a pretty big hint that Lightbringer, a holy relic of the Red Religion, might actually be a person, a living bloodline, rather than a sword. There's even a parallel in the text itself. Maester Aemon, an old blind maester at the Night's Watch, has an epiphany about another prophecy, the prince that was promised, which may or may not be the same as Azor Ahai Reborn, by the way. He realizes that the error crept in from the translation, and that the prophecy was misunderstood for generations. If one major prophecy was mistranslated and misunderstood, why not another? So if Lightbringer is a person, how does that work with the story of its creation? Let's look at the tale again, but this time, read it as a story about conception and childbirth, rather than literally forging a sword. The legend says Azor Ahai labored for 100 days and nights on his third attempt to forge the sword. When it was ready, he called his wife Nissa Nissa to him and asked her to bare her breast. She did, and he thrust the smoking sword through her living heart. Her cry of anguish and ecstasy cracked the moon, and her blood, soul, strength, and courage all went into the steel, creating Lightbringer. Now reimagine this: a husband and wife trying to conceive a child, being the labor of 100 days and nights. The sword thrust is a metaphor for intercourse. Not sure if I can say the less technical word for it without restrictions on YouTube, so I'm sorry about the weird sounding biology lesson. The husband is thrusting himself into his wife. The sword he draws out 9 months later isn't steel, it's their baby. The child would naturally contain the mother's blood, which is a word constantly used in the books to mean lineage and family. Her soul, her strength, her courage. And Nissa Nissa's true sacrifice in this scenario would be dying in childbirth, on what the books call the bloody bed. This reading makes Nissa Nissa's willing participation make sense. She wasn't inexplicably allowing her husband to murder her. She was willingly conceiving a child with him, knowing, perhaps through prophecy, that it would cost her life. In case this seems far-fetched, remember that the books actually use sword as a sexual metaphor elsewhere. There's a scene where Barbary Dustin is talking to Theon in the crypts of Winterfell, which is significant because those crypts are deeply connected to Jon's heritage, and he reminisces about Brandon Stark, Ned's older brother. She recalls Brandon saying he wanted his sword sharp enough to shave the hair from a woman, and that a bloody sword is a beautiful thing. Then she explicitly describes losing her virginity to him, and it's really explicit, so I won't repeat it word for word. But essentially, she says that she remembers the look of her maiden's blood on him. She then says, "I think Brandon liked the sight as well. A bloody sword is a beautiful thing, yes. It hurt, but it was a sweet pain." Notice the language, sweet pain. Now look back at the Lightbringer story, Nissa Nissa's cry of anguish and ecstasy, pain and pleasure, anguish and ecstasy. It's the same idea. And this anguish and ecstasy phrase appears multiple other times in the books, and every single time it's connected to either intercourse or childbirth. When Melisandre is performing magic, she feels blood trickling down her thigh, and describes the fire was inside her, an agony, an ecstasy, filling her, searing her. The suggestive imagery is blatant, especially when it continues by describing it as insistent as a lover's hand. Most tellingly, there's the scene where Melisandre gives birth to her shadow demon. Davos Seaworth, a loyal servant to Stannis Baratheon, watches in horror as Melisandre, suddenly huge with pregnancy, gives birth in a secret tunnel. Light blooms in the darkness as Melisandre shone. She spreads her legs, blood runs down her thighs, and we're told her cry might have been agony or ecstasy or both as the shadow creature emerges. This is super important for two reasons. First, this chapter comes right after the chapter where we first hear the Lightbringer legend. Martin is drawing a direct connection between Nissa Nissa's sacrifice and a woman giving birth to something magical while literally shining with light. Second, it's the mother who shines, not the baby, which makes sense because Nissa Nissa's qualities went into Lightbringer. If the mother shone with light, her child would inherit that quality. There's one more anguish and ecstasy reference worth mentioning. Jaime Lannister watches his sister Cersei burn down the Tower of the Hand, the building where the King's Hand lives. She has a look that could be grief or ecstasy, which reminds Jaime of their father's king, Aerys Targaryen, the Mad King who was sexually aroused by burning people alive. Aerys would assault his wife Rhaela after burning executions. It's heavily implied that Daenerys Targaryen was conceived during one of these nights. Before this memory, Cersei is talking about Bronn's bastard son, which brings to mind Jon Snow, the most famous bastard in the series, and the Tower of the Hand burning brings to mind Jon's burned hand. So again, we have fire, conception, anguish and ecstasy, and allusions to Jon, all tangled together. There's a book in the Night's Watch library called the Jade Compendium that contains more information about Lightbringer. It says that after being tempered in Nissa Nissa's blood, Lightbringer was never cold to the touch, but warm as she had been warm. How is a person warm? Well, body heat, natural human warmth. If Lightbringer was warm as Nissa Nissa had been warm, it suggests Lightbringer has human warmth, because Lightbringer is human. In the same scene, Jon Snow is drinking spiced wine, and we're told the warmth spread through his chest. Alcohol doesn't actually make you warmer, because it lowers body temperature, but it makes you feel warmer by bringing your warm blood closer to your skin. This is a reference to Jon's own body heat, appearing on the same page as the revelation that Lightbringer has Nissa Nissa's warmth. Right before this, Maester Aemon's family history is mentioned. He had been a king's son, a king's brother, a king's uncle. Aemon is a Targaryen, and if the theory that Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark are Jon's parents is true, commonly called R plus L equals J, then this is also Jon's family line. It's a way to connect Jon's heritage to the Lightbringer story. When Aemon marks this passage for Jon to read, he says, "Knowledge is a weapon, Jon. Arm yourself well before you ride forth to battle." Even here, weapon is used as a metaphor for something other than a literal weapon. One of the strongest pieces of evidence comes from a scene early in the series. Stannis Baratheon, who's claiming the Iron Throne, has converted to the Red religion under Melisandre's influence. To prove his devotion, he burns statues of the Seven, the main gods worshipped in Westeros at that point. For context, the Seven are the father, the mother, the warrior, the maiden, the smith, the crone, and the stranger. Davos watches the statues burn, and the description is oddly specific and symbolic. The maiden lies across the warrior, her arms spread as if to embrace him. The mother shudders as flames lick her face. A long sword has been thrust through her heart, and its grip is alive with flame. The father was on the bottom, first to fall. The stranger's hand writhes as his fingers blacken and fall away. What a weird way to frame the description of burning statues. But it's actually a coded retelling of Jon Snow's origin story. The warrior is Rhaegar Targaryen, the crown prince and son of the Mad King Aerys. Rhaegar was originally a bookish, melancholic young man who loved music and reading. But one day, he read something in his scrolls that changed him, and he told his master-at-arms, "It seems I must be a warrior." He became obsessed with prophecy and believed he had a role to play in saving the world. The maiden is Lyanna Stark, Ned Stark's younger sister. The books give us hints about this connection through Maiden's Day, a holiday where young women in white dresses place garlands on the maiden's statue and light candles at her feet. This echoes how Rhaegar gave Lyanna a garland of blue winter roses when he crowned her Queen of Love and Beauty at a tournament, a move that scandalized everyone because Rhaegar was married and Lyanna was betrothed to Robert Baratheon. Bran Stark even has a vision of Lyanna as the slim, sad girl who wore a crown of pale blue roses and a white gown spattered with gore. The maiden lying across the warrior, seeming to embrace him, represents Rhaegar and Lyanna as lovers, that she lies athwart, meaning crosswise, both burning, points to the conflict and tragedy their relationship caused. It helped trigger Robert's rebellion, a civil war that killed thousands. Then the passage transitions from maiden and warrior to mother and father. Martin is telling us that the maiden and warrior, Lyanna and Rhaegar, became parents. The father falls first. So did Rhaegar. He died at the Battle of the Trident, killed by Robert Baratheon, while Lyanna was at the Tower of Joy, either pregnant with Jon or having just given birth. The mother shudders as the flames lick up her face. This shuddering in response to fire should bring to mind Melisandre, shuddering as blood trickled down her thigh, with fire inside her in that sexualized scene mentioned earlier, and it reinforces that whole agony and ecstasy thing. Most importantly, the mother statue has a long sword thrust through her heart, and its leather grip was alive with flame. This is a direct reference to Nissa Nissa, who had a sword thrust through her heart. Martin is explicitly telling us that Nissa Nissa is the mother, and what kind of sword is alive. The kind that's a metaphor for a living person, a baby. After this scene, Davos briefly thinks about Lord Velaryon, whose house had thrice provided brides for Targaryen princes, a reference to the Targaryen bloodline, and possibly a hint that Lyanna was Rhaegar's bride in a secret marriage. Then his thoughts turn to his own sons, putting the reader in mind of parenthood. Stannis then draws Lightbringer, his supposedly magic sword, which most people who've read the books agree isn't the real deal, from the mother and thrusts it into the ground. He leaves the sword behind, and two men, Devon and Byron, kneel down and roll up the burnt sword in the king's leather cloak. They're bundling it up like swaddling a baby. Davos thinks, the red sword of heroes looks a proper mess, which is exactly what you might think about a newborn baby covered in blood from its mother's bloody bed. After Lyanna died, officially from a fever, another kind of burning, two men, Ned Stark and Howland Reed, left the Tower of Joy with baby Jon. Perhaps Jon was wrapped in a cloak, just like the sword here. The final statue is the stranger whose hand burns, fingers glowing as they fall away one by one. If we're in agreement that that's Stannis' sword isn't the real Lightbringer, then the stranger must be a hint about the true Lightbringer's identity. The stranger is the death god of the Seven, essentially the Westerosi version of the Grim Reaper. This connects to Jon in several ways. First, Jon has a burned hand. He burned it in the first book while saving Lord Commander Mormont from a White, a reanimated corpse controlled by the White Walkers. This injury is mentioned repeatedly throughout the series. Second, Jon is an outsider, a stranger, no matter where he goes. He's a bastard, or so everyone believes, who grew up at Winterfell but never truly belonged there. His name, Jon Snow, even sounds like John Doe, the placeholder name for unknown people, strangers. Third, a sword is an instrument of death, so it makes sense that Martin's metaphorical sword would be represented by the death god. If Lyanna died from childbirth complications, then Jon caused death simply by being born. The metaphorical sword killed Nissa Nissa just as effectively as a real one would have. Martin has been connecting Jon with death since the very first chapter. In that chapter, Ned Stark is teaching his sons about justice and duty by personally executing a deserter from the Night's Watch. He tells them, "A ruler who hides behind paid executioners soon forgets what death is." Immediately after this line, Jon reappears on the crest of the hill before them. Jon is what death is. This association continues throughout the series. Jon becomes a warrior, joins the Night's Watch, leads dangerous missions, and eventually becomes Lord Commander, sending men to their deaths and making impossible choices. If this theory is correct, Jon is associated with death more than just metaphorically. As Lightbringer, the weapon prophesied to fight the darkness, he literally is death, the instrument that will bring destruction to the forces of winter and ice. To finish this theory up, if Jon is Lightbringer rather than the wielder of Lightbringer, it fundamentally changes our understanding of the prophecy. In this case, Jon wouldn't be Azor Ahai Reborn. He's the weapon that Azor Ahai Reborn will use. This raises a disturbing question. If Lightbringer required a sacrifice to be forged the first time, what sacrifice might be required to temper or reforge it this time? It also reframes Jon's entire arc. He's not the prophesied hero in the traditional sense, but he is the instrument of that hero, the sword that will be wielded against the darkness. This fits with Martin's tendency to subvert fantasy tropes. Instead of being the chosen one with a magic sword, he is the magic sword, and someone else is the chosen one who will wield him. Maybe the chosen one is Dany or someone else, but that's a whole other theory in and of itself. The next theory is about the Boltons, why they flay, and the skin trade. House Bolton of the Dreadfort is one of the most disturbing noble families in Westeros. Their sigil is a flayed man on a pink field, and their words are, "Our blades are sharp." For thousands of years, the Boltons have been known for their practice of flaying their enemies alive, literally peeling the skin off living people. It's brutal, really gross, and it seems almost cartoonishly evil. But what if there was originally a reason behind this practice? What if the Boltons weren't just sadists, but were trying to steal something? George Martin wrote a horror novella called The Skin Trade about werewolves, and it has some fascinating ideas that might shed light on the Boltons' obsession with flaying. In that story, there's a legend that the power of shape-shifting werewolves could be stolen by killing one, flaying it, and wearing its skin. The story explicitly states, they weren't just murdered, they were skinned. That's where the legend comes in. The word is skin changers, remember? What if the power was in the skin? So you catch a werewolf, flay it, slip into the bloody skin, and change. Now, skin changer is also the term used in A Song of Ice and Fire for people with the ability to enter the minds of animals and control them. The Stark children are all skin changers to varying degrees. They can mentally bond with their direwolves and see through their eyes. Bran Stark is the most powerful, eventually learning to control ravens and even a human. This ability is tied to the blood of the first men and is particularly strong in the Stark bloodline, possibly connected to their ancient ties to the old gods and the children of the forest. So here's the theory. Thousands of years ago, when the Stark kings ruled the north, They possessed powerful skin-changing abilities. They could become part of the woods, slip into the minds of wolves and ravens, and perhaps even control larger predators. They had winter in their blood and ice in their eyes. The line in the skin trade could apply to them. We are the dire wolves, the nightmares who haunt your racial memories, the dark shadows circling endlessly beyond the light of your fires. The Boltons were another powerful northern house, also descended from the first men. They could endure the North's brutal winters. They could fight and scheme and survive, but they could never match the Stark's supernatural power. They weren't skin changers. So what if, in their desperation to compete with House Stark, the Boltons developed a theory? Maybe skin-changing power wasn't just in the blood. Maybe it was literally in the skin. What if the ancient Boltons believed they could steal the Stark's power by flaying them and wearing their skins as cloaks? This would explain why the Boltons have been flaying people for thousands of years, long after any practical purpose has been forgotten. According to the lore, the Boltons once flayed the skins of Stark lords and hung them in the Dreadfort. Some Bolton lords even wore these flayed skins as cloaks. The ritual has continued for millennia, even though by the time of the books, most people south of the Wall don't even believe in skin changes anymore. But there's another disturbing detail in the skin trade. Once you get started eating human meat, it's hard to stop. This connects to a running theme in the books. Multiple Stark children have now consumed human flesh, albeit unknowingly, or while in their wolf forms. Arya, while mentally inhabiting her dire wolf Nymeria, has hunted and eaten humans as part of Nymeria's massive wolf pack terrorizing the Riverlands. Bran, while inhabiting his dire wolf Summer, has tasted human flesh when Summer helped save Jon Snow from Whites. Rickon is on Skagos, an island inhabited by cannibals. Even Ghost, Jon's dire wolf, develops a taste for it during the battles at the Wall. Many ancient cultures believed that consuming parts of an enemy, especially the heart, would transfer their strength and courage to you. The old gods' religion in Westeros features blood sacrifice to weirwood trees and enemy entrails strung from branches. The faceless men of Braavos can steal not just faces, but seemingly the memories of the people whose faces they wear. There's precedent in this world for the idea that power can be transferred through tissue, through blood, through flesh, through skin. The original theory was about the origins of flaying, but after digging a bit deeper and seeing people's comments and stuff like that, there's an even more sinister theory that came from it: the Bolton theory. This theory proposes that Roose Bolton, the current Lord of the Dreadfort, isn't just a man. He's something immortal, kind of like a vampire, possibly related to the White Walkers, that has been wearing different skins and identities for centuries, possibly millennia, always remaining as Lord Bolton. Here's the evidence. Roose Bolton is described in oddly specific ways throughout the books. When we see him through Theon's eyes, after Theon's been broken and turned into reek, by Rose's bastard son Ramsay, the descriptions are unsettling. Though past 40, Roose was as yet unwrinkled, with scarce a line to tell the passage of time. There was an agelessness about him, a stillness. At one point, the text even says, Roose Bolton's own face was a pale grey mask. Really look at the language used there. A mask. Not like a mask. Just a mask. Grey and pale are the same adjectives used to describe the White Walkers, the ice demons from beyond the Wall. Another quote says, all he and Ramsay had in common were their eyes. His eyes are ice. Roose and his bastard son, Ramsay, share one distinctive feature: pale, ice blue eyes. This becomes significant when you consider Rose's history with his children. Rose had a true-born son named Domeric Bolton, who by all accounts was a decent young man, nothing like his father. Domeric wanted to meet his bastard half-brother Ramsay and rode to meet him. Shortly after, Domeric died, supposedly of a sickness of the bowels, but reading between the lines, most people believe Ramsay poisoned him. But Rose doesn't punish Ramsay. Instead, he legitimizes him, making this psychotic bastard his legal heir. When asked why he didn't kill Ramsay when he was a baby, Rose claims it was because of the taboo against kinslaying. But I mean, come on, that's kinda dumb. Rose broke guest right, one of the most sacred laws in Westeros, when he orchestrated the Red Wedding, where King Robb Stark and his mother Catelyn were murdered, along with most of their army, while under the Frey's protection as guests. Rose personally stabbed Robb in the heart, telling him the Lannisters send their regards. This is a man who violated the most fundamental sacred law in the land. Why would he suddenly care about kinslaying? The Bolton theory offers an answer. Rose kept Ramsay alive because Ramsay has the same pale blue eyes. If Rose is an immortal creature that periodically needs to steal the skin and identity of a younger man to avoid suspicion, he would need someone with matching eyes. Domeric didn't have the right eyes, so Rose either allowed Ramsay to kill him or killed him himself. Roose famously applies leeches to himself regularly, claiming frequent leechings are the secret of a long life. A man must purge himself of bad blood. On the surface, this seems like medieval medical practice. After all, bloodletting was real and common. But what if it's more than that? What if Roose needs to drain blood regularly because he's not entirely human? The others, the ice demons from beyond the wall, are associated with cold. And Roose is repeatedly described as cold. The books say Roose has no feelings, does not even shiver in the cold. The theory gets even wilder when you consider Bolton history. There are legends that the Night's King was a Bolton. Just to be clear, the Night's King was a mythical Lord Commander of the Night's Watch who supposedly took a female White Walker as his bride and declared himself king. He's not the same guy as the Night King. Old Nan, the ancient storyteller at Winterfell, whose tales have a habit of being true, tells a story about a man who had a child with a woman in white, likely another. The Boltons have been around since the Age of Heroes, thousands of years ago. They've always been the Starks' primary rivals in the north, always trying to overthrow them. What if there has always been only one Bolton, wearing different skins throughout the centuries? The faceless men of Braavos are assassins who can magically take the faces of the dead and wear them to assume their identities. Arya Stark trains with them and learns this ability. The Dreadfort is relatively close to Braavos by ship. It's possible the Boltons either learned this technique from the Faceless Men or developed something similar independently through their millennia of flaying practice. There's even a hint in Roose's name itself. In the entire series, only two people are named Roose, Roose Bolton and Roose Ryswell, who was named after Bolton. The word ruse sounds like ruse, spelled R-U-S-E, meaning a deception or trick. If Roose Bolton is literally wearing someone else's skin and pretending to be human, his entire existence is a ruse. The most disturbing implication of the Bolton theory is what happens next. If Roose is indeed an immortal skin changer, he's now positioned perfectly. He has Ramsay legitimized as his heir. Ramsay has the matching pale blue eyes. Roose is now Warden of the North, ruling from Winterfell. All he needs to do is wait for the right moment, kill and flay Ramsay, wear his skin, and become Ramsay Bolton. To the outside world, it would appear that old Lord Roose has died and his son Ramsay has inherited. But really, it would be the same immortal creature, continuing its reign under a new identity, ready for another few decades of rule before needing to repeat the process. I even saw someone suggest that Rose might kill Stannis Baratheon, wear his skin, and emerge from the Battle of Winterfell as Stannis, a changed man who Davos Seaworth would slowly realize isn't his king at all. I also really like the idea from the commenter who said the flayed man that is the House Bolton sigil is Roose himself, having to flay himself and change skins every generation. Now, am I personally convinced that the Bolton theory is true? Probably not in its most extreme form. Even I think it's super tinfoil hatty, but it's built on real textual evidence, like Rose's ageless appearance, his cold nature, his pale eyes, and the extensive history of Bolton flaying, as well as the existence of face-changing magic elsewhere in the world. And I do fully believe the reasoning behind the origins, and that at minimum, the theory highlights something genuinely unsettling about Roose Bolton. Whether he's a literal immortal skin changer, or just a deeply disturbed human who's inherited millennia of dark family traditions, they're definitely a shadow counterpart to the Starks, coveting their power and mimicking their methods in a perverted way and all that. The next theory I want to present is about Sandor Clegane being the Gravedigger, one of the most brutal and tragic characters in A Song of Ice and Fire is Sandor Clegane, better known as the Hound. He's a massive, scarred warrior who served as Prince Joffrey Baratheon's bodyguard, and later as a member of the Kingsguard. His face is horribly burned. When he was a boy, his older brother, Gregor, the Mountain, shoved his face into a brazier of hot coals for playing with one of Gregor's toys. The experience left Sandor with a deep fear of fire and an even deeper hatred of his brother. Sandor is called the Hound, both because his family's sigil features 3 black dogs and because of his fierce, loyal nature, at least when it comes to serving House Lannister. He wears a helmet shaped like a snarling dog's head. But despite his fearsome reputation, Sandor has a pretty complex relationship with morality. He hates knights and knighthood, calling them hypocrites. As he tells Sansa Stark, "Spare me your empty little compliments, girl, and your seers. I am no knight. I spit on them and their vows. My brother is a knight." But weirdly enough, Sandor does have flashes of something resembling honor or mercy. He saves Sansa from being beaten by Joffrey's guards. He protects Arya Stark, though he initially kidnaps her hoping to ransom her. He's a killer, yes, but not a mindless monster like his brother. In a storm of swords, Sandor gets into a fight at the inn at the crossroads with some of his brother's men. The fight is brutal. Sandor kills his opponents, but he's badly wounded. He takes a serious injury to his thigh that becomes infected. The books describe him getting weaker and weaker. The Hound was still weak, every movement slow and clumsy. He slumped in the saddle and sweated, and his ear began to bleed through the bandage. He needed all his strength just to keep from falling off Stranger. By the way, Stranger is Sandor's warhorse, a huge black stallion known for being incredibly difficult to handle. Only Sandor can ride or even lead him. Sandor is trying to get Arya to the twins so he can ransom her to her brother Robb, but they arrive too late. The Red Wedding has already happened. Desperate and dying from his infected wound, Sandor wants Arya to give him the gift of mercy, to kill him and end his suffering. But Arya, still angry at him for killing her friend Micah years earlier, refuses. She takes his silver and leaves him to die slowly and painfully. That's the last we see of Sandor Clegane from Arya's perspective. The assumption, I think, is that he died there, alone and in agony. In a feast for crows, Brienne of Tarth is searching for Sansa Stark. She's been told that the Hound kidnapped Sansa. It was actually Arya, but Brienne doesn't know that. Her travels with Septon Merrybold, a wandering holy man, take her to a place called the Quiet Isle, a monastery in the middle of a river where holy brothers live in silence, contemplating the Seven and doing penance for their past sins. The Quiet Isle is led by a man called the Elder Brother. He's a former warrior who fought in Robert's rebellion at the Battle of the Trident, the battle where Robert Baratheon killed Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. The Elder Brother describes his own past. All in all, I was a sad man. When I was not fighting, I was drunk. My life was writ in red, in blood and wine. When did it change? When I died in the Battle of the Trident, something slammed into my head and knocked me back into the river, where by rights I should have drowned. Instead, I woke here, upon the Quiet Isle. I spent the next 10 years in silence. Notice his language. He says he died at the Trident. But obviously, he didn't literally die. He nearly died, was transformed by the experience, and considers his violent old self to have died while a new, peaceful self was born. When Brienne arrives, she asks the Elder Brother about the Hound. There have been reports that the Hound led a raid on the town of Salt Pans, assaulting and murdering innocents. The Elder Brother tells her this is impossible because the Hound is dead. Here's their conversation. Brienne says, "You sound as if you pity him." The Elder Brother replies, "I did. You would have pitied him as well if you had seen him at the end. I came upon him by the Trident, drawn by his cries of pain. He begged me for the gift of mercy, but I am sworn not to kill again. Instead, I bathed his fevered brow with river water and gave him wine to drink and a poultice for his wound. But my efforts were too little and too late. The Hound died there in my arms. You may have seen a big black stallion in our stables. That was his war horse, stranger. A blasphemous name. We prefer to call him Driftwood, as he was found beside the river." The Elder Brother goes on to describe how he buried the Hound personally. "I buried him myself. I can tell you where his grave lies, if you wish. I covered him with stones to keep the carrion eaters from digging up his flesh, and set his helm atop the cairn to mark his final resting place. Someone later found that helm, and has been wearing it while committing atrocities. That's who raided Salt Pans, not Sandor." When Brienne says, "It is true then, Sandor Clegane is dead," the Elder Brother gives a very specific response. He is at rest. Earlier in the same chapter, before Brienne even talks to the Elder Brother, she passes through the Quiet Isle and sees the brothers at work. On the upper slopes, they saw 3 boys driving sheep, and higher still, they passed a lich yard where a brother bigger than Brienne was struggling to dig a grave. From the way he moved, it was plain to see that he was lame. As he flung a spadeful of the stony soil over one shoulder, some chanced to spatter against their feet. "Be more watchful there," chided Brother Narbut. "Septon Merrybold might have gotten a mouthful of dirt." The gravedigger lowered his head. When Dog went to sniff him, he dropped his spade and scratched his ear. Let's break down the clues here. Firstly, the size. The gravedigger is described as bigger than Brienne. Brienne is a huge woman, taller and stronger than most men. There are very few people in Westeros bigger than her, but Sandor Clegane is one of them. According to Martin himself, Sandor is taller than Jaime Lannister, Renly Baratheon, and even Robert Baratheon, but shorter than Hodor and Greatjon Umber. Secondly, the injury. The gravedigger is lame. He walks with difficulty, clearly nursing an injury. Sandor's last wound was to his thigh, which would cause exactly this kind of limping gait. Later in the passage, the text says the gravedigger walked with the awkward, lurching gait of one half crippled. And what about the hidden face? All the novices at the Quiet Isle, the new brothers who haven't yet taken full vows, wear cloth wrapped around their faces as part of their vow of silence. This would completely hide Sandor's distinctive burn scars, making it impossible for Brienne to recognize him even if she looked right at him. Pretty convenient way to mask someone's identity. And fourth, there's the dog. This is maybe the most telling detail. When Dog, Septon Meribald's faithful hound, approaches the gravedigger, the massive man dropped his spade and scratched his ear. He interacts affectionately with the dog. Sandor Clegane is called the Hound. His family sigil is 3 dogs. He tells Sansa, "A hound will die for you, but never lie to you, and he'll look you straight in the face." Dogs are central to Sandor's identity. It's kind of like a wink-wink moment. At least that's how it looks to me. And fifth, Stranger is on the Isle, Sandor's warhorse. Stranger is in the monastery's stables. The elder brother mentions this casually to Brienne, now calling the horse Driftwood. But remember, Stranger is notoriously vicious and unmanageable. I mentioned how throughout the books, it's emphasized that only Sandor can handle him. Even Arya, who's brave and good with horses, finds Stranger terrifying. So how did the brothers of the Quiet Isle get Stranger to their stables? How do they keep him there? And why haven't they sold him? War horses are incredibly valuable, and the Quiet Isle is a poor monastery. The only explanation that makes sense is that Sandor himself is there to handle the horse. Go back and reread, or I guess re-listen in this case, the elder brother's words carefully. He says, "The hound died there in my arms." He says he found Sandor at the end, and that the hound was crying in pain and begging for the gift of mercy. But he never actually says Sandor Clegane died. When Brienne says Sandor Clegane is dead, the elder brother only replies, "He is at rest." It's a vague, ambiguous statement that could mean many things. The elder brother has already established how he thinks about death. He says he died at the Trident, but he clearly didn't literally die. He means his old self died, his violent warrior self. He was reborn as a man of peace on the Quiet Isle. The theory is that the elder brother is speaking the same way about Sandor. The Hound, the violent, angry, hate-filled persona that Sandor wore, died on the banks of the Trident. The elder brother found Sandor, nursed him back to health, and Sandor has now begun a new life as a brother of the Quiet Isle. The elder brother seems to know an awful lot about Sandor's inner life, his hatred of his brother, his torment, his psychological state. When Brienne mentions looking for Sansa Stark, the elder brother immediately recognizes the description, suggesting Sandor told him about Sansa during his recovery. That's far more information than you'd get from a man dying in fever and agony. Throughout the books, there's a clear distinction between the Hound and Sandor Clegane. There's a powerful moment at the Red Wedding when Sandor puts on his helm. "Get my helm," Clegane growled at her. It was stuffed at the bottom of a sack of dried apples in the back of the wain behind the pickled pig's feet. Arya upended the sack and tossed it to him. He snatched it one-handed from the air and lowered it over his head. And where the man had sat, only a steel dog remained, snarling at the fires. Where the man had sat, only a steel dog remained. The Hound helm is sort of like a mask, a persona, a role that Sandor plays. When he wears it, the man disappears, and only the brutal, violent Hound exists. By leaving his helm on a cairn by the river, Sandor symbolically killed that persona and buried the Hound. The elder brother even says this was a mistake because someone else found the helm and started wearing it, committing atrocities in the Hound's name. That person was Rorge, one of the criminals freed from the dungeons, who later gets killed by Brienne herself. The Hound helm passes from person to person after Sandor abandons it. After Brienne kills Rorge, a member of the Brotherhood Without Banners named Lem Lemoncloak takes it. Each time, people assume the Hound is back, but it's not Sandor. If the Gravedigger is Sandor, why is he digging graves specifically? Maybe this is his penance, that he's been tasked with digging one grave for each person he killed. Given how many people Sandor has killed over the years, that would be a lot of graves. It's fitting punishment for a man trying to atone for a lifetime of violence. So what happens next? Of course, being George R.R. Martin's story, that piece probably won't last forever. I found a ton of posts and people online that believe in something called the Clegane Bowl, which is a theory that Sandor and Gregor will eventually fight to the death. Gregor, you see, didn't survive his own wounds the normal way. After being poisoned by Oberyn Martell's spear in his trial by combat, Gregor was turned into an 8-foot-tall zombie monster by Qyburn, a disgraced maester who practices dark magic. This undead mountain now serves Cersei Lannister as her champion, Sir Robert Strong. If Cersei faces a trial by combat, which seems likely given her situation at the end of A Dance with Dragons, she'll call on Robert Strong as her champion. The theory goes that the Faith of the Seven, prosecuting Cersei, will find their own champion, a reformed brother from the Quiet Isle, massive and skilled with a sword, someone with a personal grudge against the mountain. Sandor could emerge from his peaceful life for one final battle. It would be both a fulfillment of his character arc, because he'd be finally defeating his brother, the source of so much of his trauma, and a tragic end to his peace, because he's being pulled back into violence one last time. There's even a prophecy that might support this. Maggie the Frog told Cersei she would be killed by the Valonqar, which is High Valyrian for little brother. Most assume this means either Tyrion, Cersei's hated younger brother, or Jaime, her twin, but younger by minutes. But what if it means a little brother, Gregor's little brother? What if Sandor, in killing the mountain, also ends Cersei's life? I think it's a super cool theory, and I can't deny. The evidence for Sandor being alive is overwhelming. Martin is an amazing writer, obviously, and he usually doesn't include meaningless details. So all the hints that the theory presents really do point to this being a bit more than wild speculation. The Hound is dead. Long live Sandor Clegane. I wasn't sure where to put this, because I didn't want to interrupt the Gravedigger theory by going on a tangent, but there's even a disturbing theory about what's actually under Robert Strong's helmet. Cersei supposedly sent Gregor's skull to Dorne as proof of justice for Elia Martell's murder. But what if that's true? What happened to the rest of Gregor's head? And more importantly, what happened to Robb Stark's head? After the Red Wedding, Robb was decapitated, and his direwolf Grey Wind's head was sewn onto his body in mockery. But Joffrey wanted Robb's actual head sent to King's Landing, to serve to Sansa at his wedding feast. Cersei and Tywin would never have allowed something so crude, but they might have quietly given the head to Qyburn for his experiments. There's even a linguistic hint. Stark in German translates to strong, Robert Strong, Robb Stark. The names are almost the same. Messed up stuff. I kind of really like this theory. Okay, and now, my favourite theory of them all, and one I've been familiar with for a few years. It's the Eldritch Apocalypse by Paul Quentin. I can't cover every single thing as it's way too much, but I've left a link in the description, and I highly recommend that you go and read that masterpiece of an essay. In most fantasy stories, wars end with a hero's victory or a negotiated peace. In A Song of Ice and Fire, George R.R. Martin might have something far darker in mind. A war that ends because something worse arrives to consume everything in its path. That something is none other than Euron Greyjoy. So, who is Euron Greyjoy? Euron is the eldest surviving brother of Balon Greyjoy, who declared himself King of the Iron Islands during the War of the Five Kings. The Iron Islands are a harsh, rocky archipelago off the west coast of Westeros, inhabited by a people called the Ironborn, who have a long tradition of raiding, reaving, and taking what they want by force, a philosophy they call the Old Way. Euron is mentioned early in the series, but always with dread. When Theon Greyjoy, Balon's son and heir, returns to the Iron Islands in the second book, he's quite nervous about his uncle Euron. Someone asks about him. Euron Krausi has no lack of cunning, though. I've heard men say terrible things of that one. Theon responds, "My uncle Euron has not been seen in the islands for close on 2 years. He may be dead." Then he adds, almost hopefully, "If so, it might be for the best." Why this fear? At this point in the story, we don't know. Euron has been exiled by Balon for unknown crimes, sailing the world on his ship, the Silence, a blood-red vessel with black sails, crewed entirely by mutes whose tongues Euron has cut out. But when Balon dies, by falling from a rope bridge during a storm, though it's heavily implied Euron arranged his murder, Euron returns to claim the throne. And that's when we meet him properly in A Feast for Crows, the 4th book. To understand how Euron rises to power, you need to understand what he's exploiting. As mentioned, the Ironborn have an ideology called the Old Way, a belief that they're superior warriors who should live by raiding and conquering the soft people of the mainland. It's wrapped up in their religion, worship of the drowned god, whose priests literally drown people and perform CPR on them, claiming they've been reborn stronger. Their motto is, "What is dead may never die, but rises again, harder and stronger." The problem is, the Old Way doesn't work. It's never worked. Balon Greyjoy tried it twice. His first rebellion against Robert Baratheon ended in crushing defeat. His sons were killed, his fleet destroyed, and Theon was taken hostage. Years later, during the War of the Five Kings, Balon tries again, attacking the north, while Robb Stark, the king in the north, is fighting in the south. It's a strategically baffling move, attacking the only other region trying to break free from the Iron Throne, ensuring he makes enemies of everyone. When Balon's daughter Asha makes her claim at the King's Moot, which is the Ironborn election for their new king, she presents the reality of the Old Way in brutal terms. She opens 3 chests. "I give you the wealth of the stony shore," she says, and pebbles pour out. "I give you the riches of Deepwood, pine cones, and last, the gold of Winterfell, turnips." She stabs a turnip with her dagger and throws it to a man whose son died at Winterfell. "Your son Harrog died at Winterfell for this." The Old Way has brought the Ironborn nothing but pebbles and pine cones and dead sons. Asha offers them peace, alliance with the North, and actual land to settle. It's a reasonable proposal that would save countless lives. When Euron arrives at the King's Moot, he's wearing an eye patch over his left eye, hence Crow's Eye. This might seem like a cliché, the one-eyed pirate with the mysterious past, but that's exactly the point. Euron is performing the role of the ultimate Ironborn. It's a disguise, a lure. As the essay puts it, it's a set of scare quotes, the weaponized deployment of a worn-out identity, a parodic politician purr, practiced till it drowns out the tombstone teeth cackle. In other words, it's a pirate costume. Martin isn't falling back on the trope. He's showing us how Euron weaponizes the trope to manipulate his people. To win the king's moot, Euron does something no one expects. He has one of his men blow a massive twisted horn, bound with bands of red gold and Valyrian steel, covered in ancient glowing glyphs. It was a terrible sound, a wail of pain and fury that seemed to burn the ears. The cheeks of the tattooed man were so puffed out they looked about to burst, and the muscles in his chest twitched in a way that it made it seem as if the bird were about to rip free of his flesh and take wing. And now the glyphs were burning brightly, every line and letter shimmering with white fire. The sound goes on and on, filling the whole world. Then Euron makes his pitch. I shall give you Lannisport, Highgarden, the Arbor, Old Town, the Riverlands, and the Reach. I say we take it all. I say we take Westeros. Asher points out the obvious problem. If we cannot hold the North, and we cannot, how can we win the whole of the Seven Kingdoms? Euron's response is, Aegon Targaryen conquered Westeros with dragons, and so shall we. That horn you heard I found amongst the smoking ruins that were Valyria, where no man has dared to walk but me. With this horn, Ironmen, I can bind dragons to my will. The Ironborn erupt in cheers. They elect Euron their king. The reasonable proposal dies on Asher's lips, trampled by the roar of the crowd chanting for the apocalypse. So he said that he got the horn from Valyria. I'm going to go ahead and add some context here, but I have a full separate video on it on my channel as well, if you're interested. Anyways, Valyria was once the greatest empire in the known world, home to dragon lords who ruled through fire and blood magic. About 400 years before the main story, Valyria was destroyed in a cataclysmic event called the Doom. Massive volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and magical devastation that turned the entire peninsula into a hellish, haunted wasteland. The Doom of Valyria is considered so dangerous that sailors won't even approach it. Diseases, demons, and horrific curses supposedly await anyone foolish enough to go there. Euron claims he sailed to Valyria and walked through its ruins. Whether this is true is not that clear. There's skeptical lords that question this story, and it seems to rile him up. But it doesn't matter. What matters is that he brought back treasures that could only come from Valyria, a suit of Valyrian steel armor, which is something nobody knew existed, and Dragonbinder, the horn. But Euron doesn't want to recreate old Valyria at its height, it seems. He wants to recreate the Doom itself. Most people would say Valyria's reign ended with the Doom. Euron would say that was only the beginning. Valyria was born from blood sacrifice. Slaves by the thousands, fed to magical volcanoes to fuel the empire. The Valyrian Dragon Lords shed their humanity in their climb to power, becoming monsters long before the Doom consumed them. Euron wants to finish what they started. He looks at Valyria's radioactive corpse, and instead of seeing what I guess should be a cautionary tale, he sees an instruction manual. In A Clash of Kings, Daenerys Targaryen visits the House of the Undying in the city of Korth, seeking prophecy. To enter, she must drink a substance called Shade of the Evening, a psychedelic blue-black liquid. Its taste is described like this. The first sip tasted like ink and spoiled meat. Foul, but when she swallowed it seemed to come to life within her. She could feel tendrils spreading through her chest, like fingers of fire coiling around her heart, and on her tongue was a taste like honey and anise and cream, like mother's milk and Drogo's seed, like red meat and hot blood and molten gold. Inside the House of the Undying, Daenerys wanders through surreal visions, half-glimpsed prophecies, alternate realities, symbolic tableau. It's basically your brain on drugs. She sees brutal truths about the War of the Five Kings presented as dreamlike allegories. She sees the future and the past tangled together, and she hears the words, "The Song of Ice and Fire," spoken aloud for the only time in the series. Dany emerges dazzled but confused, the visions already slipping away like a fading dream. Even that short time in there is enough to mess her up a fair bit. Now for Euron, it's a permanent state. He found the warlocks who make shade of the evening, killed them, stole their supply, and has been drinking it ever since. His lips are stained blue-black from constant consumption. He lives in that house of the undying state, seeing through the walls of reality, perceiving the puppet strings that control the story. When he offers his brother, Victarion, a cup of shade to drink, Victarion spits it out immediately. Later, Euron forces it down the throat of his other brother, Aeron, who's his prisoner. Under its influence, Aeron has horrific visions of Euron's true nature. When he laughed, his face sloughed off, and the priest saw that it was not Uri, but Euron, the smiling eye hidden. He showed the world his blood eye now, dark and terrible, clad head to heel in scale as dark as onyx. He sat upon a mound of blackened skulls, as dwarfs capered round his feet and a forest burned behind him. Euron tells Aeron, the bleeding star bespoke the end. These are the last days, when the world shall be broken and remade. A new god shall be born from the graves and charnel pits. Then Euron blows his horn, and dragons and krakens and sphinxes came at his command and bowed before him. The vision continues, and Euron is no longer human. He seemed more squid than man, a monster fathered by a kraken of the deep, his face a mass of writhing tentacles. Beside him stood a shadow in woman's form, long and tall and terrible, her hands alive with pale white fire. Dwarves capered for their amusement, male and female, naked and misshapen, locked in carnal embrace, biting and tearing at each other as Euron and his mate laughed and laughed and laughed. This is just pure Lovecraftian horror, the best kind if you ask me. But where did Euron get his abilities? How did he learn to see through the walls of reality? The theory has an answer for this too. Bloodraven. Bloodraven, also known as Brynden Rivers, is an ancient Targaryen bastard, now a wizened sorcerer living far north of the Wall, woven into the roots of a weirwood tree. He appears to certain people in their dreams as a three-eyed crow, calling them north to learn magic. Bran Stark ends up following the crow north and becomes Bloodraven's apprentice, learning to see through animals' eyes, through weirwood trees, even through time itself. Bloodraven is training Bran to become the next Greenseer, a powerful magical protector who can help fight the White Walkers. He's trying to forge a weapon against the darkness, a hero who can see threats before they arrive and guide humanity to survival. But Bloodraven made a mistake. Before Bran, he sent his dreams to another boy. Euron tells his brother Victarion, "When I was a boy, I dreamt that I could fly. When I woke, I couldn't." Or so the Maester said. But what if he lied? He continues, "Perhaps we can fly, all of us. How will we ever know unless we leap from some tall tower? No man ever truly knows what he can do unless he dares to leap." This is the core of Euron's character. As a child, the three-eyed crow opened his third eye, showing him visions of power beyond imagining. The Crow was trying to find a champion, someone to fight for humanity. As poor Quentin points out in his essay, Bran Stark saw these visions and cried out in fear. Euron Greyjoy cried out in awe. Bran was thrown from a tower by Jaime Lannister, beginning his journey. Euron leapt from a tower himself, embracing the darkness, diving into the abyss. Why call himself Crow's Eye, if not as an ironic honor to the crow who opened his third eye? Euron is Bloodraven's student gone rogue. The anti-Bran, if you will. Here's where everything comes together in the theory. Most characters in the series understand magic as a binary. Melisandre, the Red Priestess, constantly preaches this. To quote her directly, "There is ice and there is fire, hate and love, bitter and sweet, male and female, pain and pleasure, winter and summer, evil and good." But Martin explicitly rejects this dichotomy. Characters repeatedly say things like, "If ice can burn, then love and hate can mate." And most men are grey. The two extremes, fire and ice, don't necessarily have to be opposites. Maybe they're just different expressions of the same destructive power. And Euron understands this. He has Dragonbinder to control dragons, the ultimate expression of fire magic. But what about ice? In the books, there's an artifact called the Horn of Winter, also called Joramun's Horn. According to legend, if you blow this horn, it will bring down the wall, the massive magical ice barrier that protects the Seven Kingdoms from the White Walkers and their army of the dead. In a storm of swords, Mance Rayder, the king beyond the wall, shows Jon Snow a huge horn and claims it's the Horn of Winter. He threatens to blow it if the Night's Watch won't let his people through the wall, though he doesn't want to, because bringing down the wall would leave humanity defenseless against the others. Stannis Baratheon captures and burns this horn. Crisis averted, right? Wrong. Later, Tormund Giantsbane, one of the wildling leaders, casually tells Jon that Mance's horn was a fake. "We never found the true horn, not for all our digging. If we had, every kneeler in your Seven Kingdoms would have chunks of ice to cool his wine all summer." Jon thinks, if Mance's horn was just a feint, where is the true horn? The answer is that Jon held it in his hands 2 books ago and didn't realize it. In A Clash of Kings, Jon's direwolf ghost digs up a bundle buried at the Fist of the First Men, an ancient fortification. Inside are dragonglass weapons, obsidian, the only thing besides Valyrian steel that can kill White Walkers, and an old war horn, simple and unremarkable. Jon gives the dragonglass weapons to his brothers of the Night's Watch to fight the others. The horn, he gives it to his friend Samwell Tarly, who doesn't know what it is or what to do with it. When Jon becomes Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, he sends Sam to Oldtown, a city on the far southern coast of Westeros, to train as a maester. Sam's journey is long and dangerous. He loses companions and has to sell most of their possessions. But of all the things sold, the horn is not one of them. Pretty narratively significant, no? Sam arrives in Oldtown at the end of a feast for crows, carrying the Horn of Winter in his luggage, completely unaware of its importance. And just where exactly is Euron heading, with his fleet of Ironborn raiders? Oldtown. Oldtown is the oldest city in Westeros. At its heart is the Hightower, an immense lighthouse that serves as the seat of House Hightower, one of the most powerful families in the realm. The city is also home to the Citadel, where maesters are trained, and the Starry Sept, one of the holiest sites of the Faith of the Seven. But Oldtown has dark, dark secrets. The foundation of the Hightower is a massive fortress of fused black stone, its origins unknown. Some maesters think it's Valyrian, Others suggest it was built by a mysterious, vanished civilization. One maester even proposed it was built by Deep Ones. They're half-human abominations, sired by creatures of the salt seas upon human women. It's also the truth behind legends of Merlings and the Ironborn's drowned god. The Black Stone Fortress is described as labyrinthine, its passages more like tunnels than halls, windowless and twisting, easy to get lost in. It predates all known history. Old Town is an eldritch city, by all accounts. It's perfect for Euron. The theory's climax is that Euron will take Old Town. He'll slaughter the Redwyne fleet, a powerful navy, in a massive blood sacrifice using bound priests from every religion as fuel for his magic. He'll climb to the top of the High Tower, one of the tallest structures in Westeros, find Sam and take the Horn of Winter from him. And then he'll blow it. The wall will fall. The White Walkers will pour south. The apocalypse Euron has been building toward will finally arrive. Not fire or ice, but fire and ice, both at once. One character, the Red Priest Moqorro, sees Euron in a vision. A tall and twisted thing with one black eye and 10 long arms, sailing on a sea of blood. I think what makes Euron really cool as a big player in the story is how totally different he is from the other chess pieces that are all vying for the throne. He is not even trying to rule Westeros in any meaningful sense. He wants to become a god by ending the world. While Jon Snow struggles in the north to unite humanity against the White Walkers, while Daenerys Targaryen fights in the east to free slaves and learn to rule, Euron is a total nutjob, sailing toward the Horn of Winter with Dragonbinder in his hands. But there's one more detail that completes the picture. Remember that Euron's lips are infamous for being blue, stained from drinking shade of the evening so often. But there's something else that turns your lips blue, extreme cold. Remember the Hornblower at the Kingsmoot, whose lips blistered and bled from blowing Dragonbinder. Fire's horn destroyed him from the inside. Well then, what will Ice's horn do to the man who blows it? I guess we'll find out if this all turns out to be true. The theory ends with saying that Euron Greyjoy is Night's King, the herald of the end. The three-eyed crow laid an egg. It's been incubating behind an eye patch this whole time. And when it hatches, when Euron finally removes that eye patch and reveals what's beneath, the crow's eye itself, the song of ice and fire will end. Just fascinating stuff, really. Please do go and read the original essay, as my retelling has not done it justice. It's got a lot of supporting direct quotes from the book, and excellent writing from the author of the essay. But I do hope I've covered the most key bits of it. But that's the end of tonight's tinfoil hat theories. If you guys like this one, I'll probably end up doing another, because I found so many theories online, which is to be expected, given how long people have been waiting for the next book. But until next time, stay safe out there, friends, and sweet dreams.